Are those elk farms in Tennessee supposed to be high fenced? Is that part of the ag's requirement?
They are not required to be high fenced to my knowledge, but fenced nonetheless.
If I may, Commissioner Baker,
Absolutely.
is that okay, Chuck?
Yes, sir, please do.
I've been coordinator, cabin coordinator for 24 years.
Step up to the mic,
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Thank you. I've been the coordinator for 24 years and have watched this evolve. Watched the disease only be in Wyoming and Colorado, associated with a research facility where it started out of sheep scrapings. 2002, the disease moved across the Mississippi River, I believe into Minnesota, and we enacted restricted movements based on the science for carcasses. We also required preserves. We started the process of requiring preserves to only acquire monitored animals. In 2004, the Department of Agriculture had done shipment requirements for bovine tuberculosis. Dr. Hatcher, correct me if I misspeak, please. Bovine tuberculosis, brucellosis, and animals had to be enrolled in a CWD program for at least 5 years. And they had to get an entry permit to bring them in. Most of the elk and red deer that are imported into this state go to preserves. They have to get the permit, all of their stuff, their certification. There's a lengthy packet they have to submit to Dr. Clariday and to document that they are in compliance. In 2006, the agency changed the preserve rules to require only acquisition in state herds as well to be monitored for 5 years. So preserves can only acquire CWD susceptible species from certified CWD monitored herds. In 2012, they added Sika deer, and there is no monitored herds of Sika. Sika are like a little Japanese elk. And what we did is we told the preserves any Sika they had present in their enclosures was fine, but as of December the 12th of 2012, they could not acquire any more Sika deer for their operations. So this has evolved, and we have concern with high fences because we don't know what's going on. And in the mid to late 90s, Cheryl will remember this, we were in a class action lawsuit with the main thing being captive whitetail and farming. And the disease was not really considered a huge threat by the farming community, even by the hunting community. But in 2004, we won that because the gentleman that runs the facility that does the CWD research that started the disease testified on behalf of the state. And we kept the ban on whitetail in place. But up to that point, there was a lot of clamor that we were going to lose the prohibition on whitetail. So you had high fences go up. We don't know if any of those facilities may have imported some whitetail. And what we're finding in Missouri, New York, Virginia, West Virginia is these are high fence operations that had acquired animals prior to 2002, which is when everybody moved in the eastern part of the state to protect themselves. So we're just concerned about the unknown. And I don't know if I've answered your questions or I've just thrown too much information.
More information is better. This is a big issue. Obviously, I feel like we're trying to do whatever, we need to do whatever we can to try to stop this. Obviously, if we're still, and somebody else is in these chairs in 100 years and we don't have a vaccine or some type of solution to stop this, it's going to be everywhere. I mean, eventually they're going to walk, but we need to keep it as long as we can. But is there a way that we can make a more concerted effort to test some of these facilities? Or I realize there's limitations based on manpower and finances, but I mean, this might be something we need to look at.
Currently what we do is we work in conjunction with Dr. Hatcher's office on the preserves. They are required to get monitored animals from a 5-year program. In other words, they had to be in the program for at least 5 years, no addition of any animals that were not in a 5-year program. So there are 11 preserves that Dr. Hatcher's office is responsible for taking the OBEX when they harvest something, which is part of the end of the monitoring program. Taking OBEXs is part of the monitoring program. We were assigned 3 preserves. 2 of those have now ceased to exist. We only have 1 that the agency is responsible for responding and sampling OBEX. I asked the captain in the district to check on that 1 facility back last month in light of the concerns. The owner-operator, it's owned by a company out of Texas. They just said they had not harvested anything in the last 3 years. They'd killed some pigs, that was about it. So, and their red deer herd, which is what they have, it's been closed for 8 years. I think it was 8 years ago, and they haven't had any need to import. So we're testing any CWD susceptible species. The bulk that come into the state or go into the preserves where our rules require testing. And is there anything I'm missing, Dr. Hatcher, as far as that's our biggest collaboration with the Department of Agriculture is the preserves and imports and monitoring.
The whitetail only enclosures, they don't fall into that category, right?
They do not, you are
So
correct.
are we testing those? Because then obviously some of those had deer that were brought in to improve.
When we were doing a lot of testing, where's Chris at? He said testing is the word I had to use, not surveillance. Some of those animals that were harvested out of those high fences ended up being checked at check stations when we were doing a lot of testing from 2002 to about 2007, 2008. So we were, and I know that I worked at a check station in Hickman County, and we had a couple of animals come in, and I know they came in from behind high fences over in the Attorney Center area.
Let me add to that,
Yes.
and say that the way that we would obtain samples from the properties you're describing, Commissioner Teague, is if they did bring them to a check station and we were there sampling, and then also it would be possible to ask for those property owners to volunteer samples as they kill deer. I guess that would be an option as well. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. Well, in my professional opinion, the reason why we don't already have chronic wasting disease in our state is because we don't allow the importation of white-tailed deer in Tennessee. That is a competitive advantage for sure for this state, and ensuring that remains the case is certainly in our best interest. And one other thing is the fact, basically all we're saying is that there'll be an increased focus in sampling near these captive serving facilities, and that's not only due to the feelings of wildlife professionals, but also the experts, the wildlife disease experts at the Southeastern Disease Cooperative have recommended that if we're gonna do sampling, that we should focus in those areas.
You still say that your concern for the spread is greatest amongst enclosures, not as much the importate or bringing processed?
The
or
movement
unprocessed?
of cervids, period, increases the likelihood of this disease.
Of the detections found, almost all of them go back to cervid whitetail facilities that were infected at some point in time, didn't know they were infected, shipped animals east to other facilities, and then when they were found to be positive, they would go back to facilities like what they had in Wisconsin and New York, and they did some testing, and sure enough, well, in New York they did, and the high fence operation was not in play at the time. But as far as the transmission of the prion through carcasses or meat, there's only one anecdotal conclusion. It was in New York, because that gentleman where that facility that originated the disease had gotten whitetail from a high fence operation that was no longer in play at the time of the detection. They had gotten whitetail from Wisconsin from a known positive facility. but he had those animals, plus he was doing whitetail deer rehabilitation and was a taxidermist. So, and at the point in time, if the Department of Agriculture showed up, he was a deer farmer. If the New York Department of Conservation showed up, he was a deer rehabilitator. And and reason is that the state vet from New York and USDA representatives actually came to Nashville to meet with a CWD working group, and they sat down and talked about their options and explained what they were doing. So we only have one situation where there was anecdotal evidence to link a possible carcass. All others have been whitetail outside of one detection of a captive elk in Nebraska.
But we presently still restrict counties with known,
Yes, sir.
but deer don't know what county they're in.
Right.
And, you know, if they're in this county, they're probably gonna be in the one beside it. I have a, you know, I realize there's other things we have to worry about, but I just feel like we're always, you know, the trains left the station. By the time we add a county, it's, that last season is already gone, and it's happened, and then we add it the next year, and it's
Oh, I understand. It's a delayed in the testing, and, you know, when y'all do the list before hunting season starts, then they have a detection and it rolls around, and as you said, the train's already.
we do the list, and then there's really, it's just an honor system as far as I know, because, you know, if a deer comes from Illinois, it's a bow kill, it's got a tag, it doesn't specify the county.
The county that comes.
You know, and the taxidermists, they just take them, I think, you know, I don't know, something needs to be discussed, but if you know, if it's something that's of a concern, evidently it is, if we are restricting all the counties with known positive
Correct.
CWD.
That's correct.
Let me make a suggestion, and that is, from commission's standpoint, we wanted the commission to be aware that a plan was in place, particularly given Arkansas circumstances, that we are as ready as we can be once a budget expansion is approved. That was a plug, but there is a plan in place, and I would make the recommendation that commissioners, if you would, read the plan. You've been provided a copy of that, number one. Number two, come up with a list of questions that you have regarding this. Concurrently with this, I'd like to ask Commissioner Teague, Chairman Teague, and Chuck, the wildlife staff, to consider what action, if any, should commission take. We are not going to be approving this plan, but there may be things that we can approve, do rule changes that enhance this plan. And I would like these matters to come before us before 5 of us rotate off. I would like this plan complete and in place as much as we can do it within the next 6 months. And in keeping with there needs to be more dialogue. There's going to be more questions from commission. Maybe we can have a workshop before the August or September meeting to get into this a little deeper, if that's all right. Is that all right with you, Chairman Teague, or would you like to?
Yeah, that's fine. Obviously, it's your show. You know, a lot of the questions I ask, I knew the answers to, but, you know, I want this discussion to get going a little bit, and I realize we need to move on for time restraints, but there's other organizations and other entities in the state that, you know, it's important for them to this subject to stay out. So I'm glad we've had a fairly lengthy discussion on it, but we definitely can do more work.
If we do decide to make some rule changes, what's the length of that process?
It depends. It would be posted 45 days, then it would go before the commission. Is that right, Cheryl? 55.
55. So, I mean, it's,
It could be heard in the next couple of months. It's filed pretty soon, and it could be voted on probably in the fall or early fall.
well, I mean, what I'm getting at is if, after tomorrow, we're not meeting again until August, unless we have a called meeting. And then,
It could be done through the meeting. And whenever it's voted on, I mean, it's just a matter of time before it's due.
yeah,
I mean, you set it in motion.
I'm just trying to get a timing in my mind, so.
Just
Like-
thinking about, instead of thinking about having a proclamation before the commission you know, depending on the time, and you could certainly decide when that would be appropriate, but potentially have a phone call meeting that would be publicly noticed, where we could at least understand what contemplate some recommendations. I hate to see a proclamation get filed and then 55 days later, all of a sudden we're stuck with that language when we haven't even discussed it, haven't learned together, and hadn't had a conversation. So I don't want it to be longer than it should be, but I also think that I don't know that I want to be at the will of the piece of paper that comes to us, because I know that would shackle in some ways the agency, and certainly it would shackle this agency in our learning process.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'll acknowledge that we had discussions about timelines, and based on the conclusion that everything that we felt would help and fell within this commission's authority required a rule change. That's why we haven't come forward today with any proclamation recommendations, because it just wasn't the appropriate mechanism to do that. So we certainly took all that under consideration, and in fact we went ahead and drafted a verbiage for a rule, and we have that available for review. I didn't present that specific language today, but obviously that'd be something that the agency needs to consider a little more, and then we can share that with you as a recommendation if you so desire.
Absolutely, and again, I lean on Commissioner Teague and the Wildlife Committee, Management Committee, to bring this to us, if you will. There's no way you could have had a rule to us and met the time frame for today. And what you all have accomplished, if it's entered our state tomorrow, you've got a great plan. And I guess the thing that I believe I speak on behalf of the whole commission, if there's any action that we can or should take to enhance the strength of this plan, we want to be about that. So that's all and I say 6 months. I guess I just want to make sure it's done so that the next group of commissioners that come on board, it's in place for them and you can move forward. Y'all have done a phenomenal job. And if you could get that language to us, I think that would be a good starting point.
Can you put that language up there? I feel like if we are gonna look at any recommendations as far as changes to bringing deer in and out of the state, that if it's not in the hunting guide for this year, then it's, probably. So, whether it's goes forward or not, I mean, it might be something to think about, because I know that goes to print. So I don't know if it's.
Let me address that, please. And for me, to be more specific, the language that was drawn up was specific to the importation of cervid carcasses. It didn't involve anything regarding cervid lures.
Which we've done
It was just
regarding other areas.
It was just a simple red line, but I'll ask the commission to allow a little more opportunity for us to discuss that internally before we propose
That's
such
totally
language,
fine.
because we hadn't had appropriate review.
As I think about it, it might just be appropriate to put something in the hunting guide to say, check the website. There may be some changes, regulations for transportation or
Correct.
carcasses or something, because
Be a good idea.
just in case.
Comfortable? Good. Thank you very much.
Chuck, before you leave, I got one more item. It's kind of a question and possibly something that I might want to address tomorrow. I know we made some changes today to close deer season in some flood-prone areas on public lands in northwest Tennessee. What would be the action, if any, to set similar regulation for public lands, or for private lands, so we won't have to have the emergency call meeting? Last time there was a week window before we could get that happened, and obviously there was a lot of taking of animals that we all really didn't consider hunting. It was more so killing. That's my opinion, but is there a way or discussion we can have to set certain river levels in a certain area that it's an automatic closure where it's in the book and everybody knows it?
I'm going to defer to Ms. Cheryl, please.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to delay my committee, believe me, but some of these things I feel are very important, and if they're not in the guide, then people are gonna say they didn't know, I'm afraid. Y'all may have to order some pizzas.
Okay, thanks, I appreciate it. I've just got 3 slides to just help you. I was proud of my pictures, so I had to show you that. In dealing with floods, well, I guess it's not a touch screen. Okay, your options in dealing with the flood is well, obviously, first and foremost, do nothing. The statute that provides for emergency meetings worked well last time, and it hasn't happened but once in 30 years. So I think you could easily do nothing, and it'll be fine. Another option would be to get a statute passed, assuming Chris thought he could get that done. Some states have statutes preventing the hunting of trapped wildlife. For example, Missouri's code says wildlife except waterfowl may not be pursued or taken while trapped or surrounded by floodwaters or fire while fleeing from floodwaters or fire. And your third option, probably, I'm guessing the most desirable for y'all, Chuck, is I got it. Thanks. Pass a rule. And what you would do in this rule is you would designate. I know you can't read that, and there's no reason for you to. I'll explain it in a minute. Pass a rule where you designate flood-prone areas. However you see fit to mark those areas, and then you would refer to our website as to when they're open or closed based on the flood conditions at the time. And I just put this up here because that's Arkansas's website that people go to, and it goes on and on. It's more than this one page, but that's on the website for people to refer to in the case of flood. So the sportsman would go to that website and find out whether that particular area they wish to hunt is open or closed.
I guess it could be structured any way we want it, but in lieu or instead of all that language, the simple language we had last time that had basically physical boundaries and everything from there, the river was closed at a certain level. I mean, the rule could.
That's what this does. It's just describing several different areas of Arkansas, the state of Arkansas. But essentially, what is in that text is a physical boundary and a river gauge. That when a certain river gauge hits a certain level, that area closes, and it applies to both public and private land.
Sure, but it wouldn't take a table like that for us
Not
because
for
we just got the boundary we used last year, probably.
That's the only.
Yeah, I just feel like there's a lapse between realizing the problem's there, agency going out to see how bad it is, and if people are actually shooting these trapped animals, and then like this year there's a window there where a lot of activities took place that I'm not comfortable with at all, and I thought it would be simple to address this issue and not have to. I did a conference call from like a duck camp, in a parking lot, standing on top of my truck to get service. So it just seems, it may never happen again, but we need to be prepared for everything we possibly can.
Director Carter, when we talked about this before, you said there were some other instances that we might need to have closures. Is that something you want to address here, or?
There are a number that have come up in the past. We've had requests before during very dry conditions to halt muzzleloader season. We've had I could go through several, but a whole bunch of different issues that come up in addition to flooding. So it'd be kind of hard to encapsulate all of those at one time, and knowing what they are. We still, as Cheryl said, if they're outside of the things that we already have regulations on, we can have an emergency meeting, whether or not you go forward with what Commissioner Teague is saying. So, but yeah, there are a number of other issues as well.
I know we obviously had a overwhelming support from landowners and all sportsmen. I had no negative comments other than I wish it would have happened a week ago, because we sat here and watched people jump in a boat, leave, come back with a deer, grab somebody else, go back out, and we're not being responsible and caring for the wildlife, I don't think, unless we have something that what's nice about a standard river stage is that instead of waiting and wondering when we're going to make the decision, that it's already in the book and people see the water level coming up. And I mean, they're talking about it in Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, weeks before. They're like, the river's at this stage, here it comes. So the word gets out because everybody's kind of, hoping it doesn't happen, but it's a big topic of conversation, but it's been that way and everybody seems to be comfortable with it. I think it's something we should look at. Anybody? I believe that's all the business for Wildlife Management Committee.
Was you directing them to bring something before us tomorrow?
Absolutely, yeah. If I wasn't direct enough, I don't need to make it up, so I'd like to, if we.
It'll take time, yeah.
Right. So by 9?
Depends on what time we get out of here today, I guess.
No, we can, whenever it can be done reasonably, if it's tomorrow or 2 weeks.
I think we would have to do a rule change.
Yeah. It'll take
So,
a
I
while.
don't know.
Don't ask me about technical stuff. I'm just saying, the deer, there's 50 deer standing on a half acre and people are riding up in a boat and killing them. As soon as we can, we need to have regulations that stop that. That's all I'm saying. So I don't know.
I think we've got your direction to prepare a rule, but we will have some time constraints and procedures that the commission won't be able to take action on tomorrow. It may,
Yeah, that's fine.
It may be- it
I'd
may
like
be
to get it in the
August meeting.
book if we're gonna do it for this year.
Chris, let me speak to that. Can staff come up with what Commissioner Teague is requesting and put it through the process such that we can act at our August meeting?
Potentially. Yes.
Great answer, thank you. That was
Now-
perfect.
Now, but I'm thinking ahead to what Commissioner Teague said. I don't know that will allow for it to be published in the hunting guide this year. I don't believe that it would.
It could, can you not put a proposal in there of something that, to just check the website?
Right.
There's discussion of
I think there's certainly some
I mean, it
options.
doesn't have to be.
I
You
think
know
there's
what,
certainly
we
some
can-
options there.
if we have to have another meeting next year, like we did, that's fine too, but this seems long-term.
I think we can get the rule in effect. I think there are other ways that we can notify the public that the rule's in effect. I just didn't want to commit to say we can have something done and published in this year's hunting guide, but that doesn't mean that we can't pass a rule that is effective for this hunting season.
Sometime that tight timeline though gets everybody like really motivated. Things
Yes.
happen quick, but
50 days, got to be filed, Secretary of State 50 days before you consider it, then it's got to go to the AG, then it's got to sit there for another 120 days before it can become effective. So there's some hard dates in there that we can't really have much flexibility with, but can we have a rule prepared for your consideration by the August meeting? I think the answer to that would be yes.
Thank you. And I guess to Commissioner Teague's point, there needs to be something in the hunting guide that advises folks that there may be emergency closures, whether that's required by a special call meeting or we happen to get this rule in place when that happens. But something can be put in the hunting guide that addresses that. Is that a reasonable request? Commissioner Teague, is that addressing your concerns, which are very, very valid?
sure.
Okay. Thank you all. It's been thorough. The Wildlife Committee's done a phenomenal job. I'm gonna hand this off to Bill Cox, Vice Chair of the Budget Committee. Commissioner Cox, the floor is yours.